This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Sean Cole, but the real star of today's show sits here behind me, and that is the RSeat RS1 sim racing chassis. The RS1 is the base model from RSeat, but it is far from the base model when you really look at its features. Now, with that said, it is still the little brother to the N1 chassis that I recently reviewed. But with this being the starting point from RSeat, I really would have to define them as a high-end sim racing chassis company. Now, the RSeat RS1 is a GT-style driving position and is a very complete rig. It is also compatible with most of the wheels, pedals, and shifters from Logitech, Fanatec, and Thrustmaster. The RSeat RS1 is highly adjustable in many different ways and can accommodate a wide variety of driver sizes. The RS1, like all RSeats, are made in the EU in the RSeat factory. This is not a China rig. The RS1 starts out at $689 for a bare chassis that is available in a powder-coated black or white matte finish. It is also available at $899 with a seat in either black, red, or white covering and a black seat back. For $100 more, there's a special edition Assetto Corsa model, and then to top off this lineup, you can get it with an Alcantara seat covering in black for $1,099. All of these prices being based on US pricing and shipping, and it may vary for your country. The RSeat RS1 is a modular design, meaning that you can get it with accessories or add those on later as you go. For this test, I'm actually using the butt kicker mount, which is an additional $99. Not being tested today are a keyboard and mouse tray for $139, a 5-speaker mounting kit for $99, a tablet and button box mount for an additional $107, and the shifter upgrade kit for bigger shifters or flight controls for $129. All of these are available in black or white to match the chassis. And regardless of which model you choose, the chassis of the RS1 is made completely of metal, and again, made in the RSeat factory in Gabrovo, Bulgaria. The RS1 is made from 1.5-inch mandrel bent carbon steel. These tubes are very heavy duty and reminiscent of the tubing used in real racing chassis. This tubing is cut, bent, and welded, all in the RSeat factory. The base of the RS1 is made up of a single piece of tubing that starts at the front and then curves and extends to the rear of the chassis and then finishes up at the front again. This main tube is then cross-braced with laser-cut steel plates and cross-brace tubing in addition to the pedal mounting plate to make a very rigid lower structure. At the rear end, reinforced steel plates extend upward and then bend towards the middle and hold the seat sliders. The seat sits upon 2 more risers that allow for multiple seat angle positions when mounted. The seat itself is a composite material with a painted black finish. The seat material on my RS1 was the Alcantara leatherish finish with an embroidered seat logo on it. There's a good amount of padding and seatbelt holes if you really wanted to use seatbelts. In the middle of the rig and on the right hand side, there are 2 more 1.5-inch pieces of tubing that extend up and join and then bend over the driver's knees to hold the wheel deck assembly. The wheel deck assembly is 2 pieces of parallel metal plates, each with 2 pivot points, allowing for a massive amount of height and angle adjustment and even a slight amount of telescoping adjustment in and out. The deck size is small, but should work with all wheels and measures in at about 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters wide by 5.25 inches or 13 centimeters front to back. The wheel deck plate has holes pre-drilled in it for the big 3 wheel companies, Logitech, Fanatec, and Thrustmaster. And then at the front is the pedal plate deck that has 2 channels cut into it to allow front to back adjustment of the pedals. The pedal riser is a very stout assembly that is made up mostly of a giant steel plate that is pre-drilled for most pedal types. The plate is very large and will work with almost any pedals that come to mind, but its overall dimensions are 13.8 inches or 350 millimeters wide by 14.5 inches or 36.8 centimeters tall. This riser plate sits on a pivot point and can be adjusted from flat to very, very inclined. The entire finish on the rig is a high-quality, powder-coated black matte paint that is smooth, semi-shiny, and very tough. One of the top features of the RSeat RS1 is that it is so highly adjustable in so many different ways, whether you're talking about tuning in the angles for the pedal or wheel deck, or whether you're talking about sizing it for different drivers. This rig will work for drivers anywhere from 4'2" all the way to 6'6", with the seat sliders allowing for about 3.5 inches or 90 millimeters of travel. They can also be mounted to the frame in 4 different spots, allowing for another 2.5 inches or 63.5 millimeters of movement. The RS1 has multiple mounting holes on the seat risers that allow for various different angles or mounting positions. The pedal tray is also very adjustable. For starters, the entire assembly can be moved forward and backwards 4 3/4 inches or 120 millimeters. In addition to that, the angle of the pedal tray can be adjusted from flat to tilted in preset increments of up to 60 degrees higher. The wheel deck is a very cool design with 2 plates that work together to create 2 different adjustment points. These adjustments allow for 3 inches or 8 centimeters of up and down or height adjustment, and at the same time allow for 60 degrees of angle adjustment. The arm of the shifter mount has 2 mounting holes in it, one for a forward and one for a little bit pushed back position. It is also adjustable closer or away from the seat. However, the farther away you move it, the lower the shifter will sit. The top plate also has an angle adjustment to make sure the shifter is straight or flat, regardless of the angle the arm is set at. And the overall footprint of the rig while sitting in your game room will be somewhere between 51.2 and 58.2 inches, or 1,300 to 1,480 millimeters front to back, and 27.1 inches or 688 millimeters wide, with a height of 43.3 inches or 1,100 millimeters tall. Meanwhile, this puts the seat bottom approximately 14 inches or 35.5 centimeters off the ground depending on its position, and the wheel deck approximately 8.5 inches or 21.5 centimeters higher than the seat bottom depending on its position, but those are the measurements of the way I have it set up for me. Now, before I could actually drive in the RSeat RS1 chassis, I did have to put it together. And if you remember from my review of the N1 chassis, it took a couple of hours to do so. Now, this one went a whole lot easier and a whole lot faster, but the first thing I had to do was get it out of its giant box. This rig, with its accessories in the box, weighs well over 100 pounds. And upon opening that box, I saw a very well packaged rig. I couldn't even start removing pieces without cutting some things loose and gaining some access. In the end, once I had removed a couple of boxes and could actually see what I was dealing with, I found it was easiest to tip the box over and slide out the rig all in one piece. Then I could get down to unpackaging the pieces and getting a good look at things. The RS1, when unpacked, is pretty easy to deal with and can be built by yourself in about a half an hour. It comes with all of the tools that you're gonna need and a bag of extra hardware, and it also comes with detailed instructions that are easy to follow along with. I cleared out some space and got down to business. We start off by installing the feet on the bottom of the rig. Then we just loosely install the 2 seat mounts for the seat. The hardware for this is already sitting on the chassis, and the sides are directional with the logos in the rear. From here, we install the pre-built, pre-drilled wheel deck assembly, and I'm not going to worry about its position just yet. Then comes the shifter mount with 4 nuts and bolts. Then comes the pre-built, pre-drilled pedal mount. This was actually one of the harder parts, as the slider that the bolts screw into falls when the bolts are removed. Also, the pedal mount is very heavy, so I cheated and used a rolled up sweatshirt to help out on this stage. Like the wheel deck, I'm not going to worry about its adjustments just yet, that'll come later. Next up is the seat. Remove its 4 bolts, slide it into position, and bolt it down. As I mentioned, I did receive one of the accessories for the RS1, that being the butt kicker mount, which proved to be the hardest part of building the entire rig. It actually sandwiches between the seat and its side mounts. It took several attempts to get it right. Damn it. And a little help can actually go a long way in this phase. Or once again, my good old sweatshirt came through and did the trick. And I would take great care with this part or accessory because I did manage to scratch my seat, and that didn't make me very happy with my new rig. So once I had the rig completely built, it was time to install my gear. And at this point in time, I am running some extremely high sim racing gear. I'm running a Leo Bodner wheel and Rick Motec pedals. But before I installed my hardware, I wanted to make sure this rig did in fact work with those big 3 manufacturers, both for the wheel, pedals, and shifters. So I started out with the Logitech. At the pedal base, I was able to mount the Logitech pedals through the pre-drilled slots and use the hardware provided by RSeat. I was able to mount the Fanatic pedals down with the pre-drilled holes and ended up using 4 nuts and bolts that I had laying around. And then finally were the T3PA pedals by Thrustmaster, and they also just bolted down with the provided hardware. In each and every case, it was easy to do, and it held down the pedals very nicely. When it came to the wheel deck, things went just as easily as the pedal base. The Logitech wheel used its stock clamps in the front and 2 bolts in the back through the pre-drilled holes in the wheel deck plate. The Fanatic wheel used the 3 hole mounting locations on the base of the Club Sport wheels, and the Thrustmaster had to have its clamp removed, but then hard mounted via the 2 mounting holes on the base of the Thrustmaster high-end bases. The clamp mechanism on Thrustmaster wheels will not work on this wheel deck, but as long as they have mounting hardware, it's pre-drilled for all Thrustmaster wheels. Now in my case, as I mentioned, I wanted to mount my high-end gear, and that was going to take a little bit more work. With the Rick Motec pedals, they actually have the same mounting hole locations as Fanatic pedals do as well. So that one was pretty easy. Just dropped them down and put some nuts on the bolts, and they're very easily held in place. And for my Bodner wheel, I used the wheel to mark some locations on the wheel deck and then drilled 4 holes to bolt it down to that deck. There is plenty of room to work with, and that plate steel on the deck is more than strong enough for even a wheel of this caliber. The shifter mount that does come with the rig is also pre-drilled for Logitech, Fanatic, and Thrustmaster shifters. And with that, it was really time to get this rig dialed in for me. Between the seat, the wheel deck, and the pedals, it is the wheel deck that moves the least amount, so I figured I would start there, then move on to the seat, and then onto the pedals. The dual plate design of the RSeat wheel deck allows for a lot of angle and height adjustment. Once the proper angle and height were achieved, there are 8 bolts that tighten down the dual plate design. Now that I know where the wheel and wheel deck are going to be, I can adjust the seat, and that's actually when I ran into my first roadblock or problem with the RS1 rig. When I slid the seat all the way forward, now keep in mind, I'm 5'5", 5'6", very short driver. When I slid the seat all the way forward, the arm for the shifter actually ran into the upright on the right-hand side. Now I really wanted to move on to getting everything dialed in, so I went ahead and removed the shifter arm and worried about the seat position. So I had taken a gamble or a guess based on other RSeats, and I put that seat at full recline. When I slid it forward, got it in position with the wheel, I realized I was at the perfect angle and the perfect distance, and I could actually move on to the pedal tray. I started with adjusting the angle of the pedal deck until I got the pedal faceplates at the angle that worked best for my feet. By removing 1 bolt on each side of the pedal base, you can swing the entire plate up and down. And then the bolts are reinstalled into one of the holes that prevent movement and tighten back down. And then the 2 bolts that held the entire assembly onto the chassis can be loosened, and the distance of the pedals can be adjusted until correct and then locked back down. I ended up with the pedals about 1 inch from the closest position. And that actually takes us back to the shifter. Now again, with that seat slid all the way forward, there is no clearance for the shifter in its stock location. So I did look for an alternate, and I did come up with 2 options, each of which we're going to take a little bit of work. There are 4 holes on the bottom of the chassis, but they don't perfectly line up with the shifter mount. I got the top 2 to kind of hold in place, and then drilled 2 holes on the bottom and was able to mount the shifter down low with adequate clearance. However, it did leave the shifter a little on the low side. This might be good for larger shifters, but if you have a short arm, you might want it higher. The other option is actually to use the stock location, but move it back. So instead of using all 4, I used the back 2 holes and then drilled a new 2 holes in the rear to hold the shifter. And this effectively moved the whole unit backward in the same location. This worked well and had me up and running in no time. Mission accomplished. And the last thing to install prior to being able to race on this rig is my butt kicker onto the butt kicker accessory, which you have 2 different options you can work with, either the bolt-on or the clamp-on style butt kicker. In my case, I went with the clamp-on, clamped it on, plugged it in, and I was up and running and ready for some racing. I did most of my driving with my Ricmotech pedals and my Leo Bodner wheel, and I figured this combination would really stress this rig to the maximum level. In fact, if this rig can handle that wheel and pedal combo, it's going to be able to handle any wheel and pedal combo on the market. I found that the driving position for me was perfect. I mean, if I had built this rig for myself, I would end up in this exact driving position. When I built my DIY rig out of aluminum, it was very close to these dimensions. Being able to get that perfect driving position allows me total comfort and total confidence in my driving. It allows for aggressive and precise driving and gives me my best shot at endurance while racing. It will reduce my fatigue and it will keep my concentration at a higher level. The seat itself was very comfortable and its shape fits my body shape very well. I am in total contact with the seat even through the lumbar or lower back area. And with its current incline, I have great thigh support from the bottom of the seat. The wheel deck, despite being supported on only one side, is very strong, and I never noticed any kind of wiggles or oscillations from the wheel. It was rigid, and the lockdown position for the wheel held strong as well. The pedal tray allowed me to get not only the right front to back distance, but also to really get the right angle. This allows so much better modulation of the pedals when the faces match your foot and your ankle's rotation properly. However, when I pressed hard on the brake, it would allow for a little bit of flex out of the pedal plate. This flex was minimal and I could barely notice it with my feet, but it was going on. With my changes to the shifter mount, I did get it in a pretty good position. It still lacked a little bit of adjustment to put it exactly where I wanted, but it is in the ballpark and it's very sturdy. After tons of hours of driving, the RS1 simrig quickly became one of my all-time favorites. It was so comfortable, it was so rigid or wiggle-free that I really never thought of anything but apexes, passing people, and my lap times. Even though I was tasked with reviewing the rig, there was so little to think about it while driving, and for me, that is pretty much perfection. The one thing I haven't talked about much is the butt kicker mount, and you could say, well, who cares? It's just a butt kicker mount. But when it comes to transmitting those forces, taking that vibration and putting it into you, how it's mounted can be very critical. Well, with this mount, it's tied directly into the seat, and that is where you are going to feel it most, but with no additional or annoying vibration sounds beyond what the butt kicker is supposed to do. I also found the rig to be very airy, and that's a good thing. I had a lot of room down by my feet. I had a lot of room down in my knee area. I had a lot of room to get in and out of the rig, and that just makes it feel that much more comfortable. With the upright being only on the right-hand side of the rig, it really helps this out and ended up being much stronger than I had expected. The RSeat RS1 rig performed as well as I could have asked for, and its GT driving position really matched the type of cars I like to drive, the way I drive, and most importantly, the way I want to sit. So at this point, we've talked about the RSeat RS1 and what it's made of, how it's built, and all of its features. We've talked about putting it together, getting all of its adjustments made for our components, and dialing it in for ourselves. And we've even talked about how it performed on track. So to bring this review to a close, let's go ahead and break things down with the good, the not so good, and the bottom line, starting off with the good. And the first thing is its solid main structure, especially the wheel deck. Comes with a shifter mount included. Highly adjustable wheel deck. Highly adjustable pedal base. Reversible shifter mount. Comfortable seat. Good paint quality. More than enough hardware, extra included. Pre-drilled, compatible for Logitech, Fanatic, and Thrustmaster wheel, pedals, and shifters. Works with heavy-duty wheels. Looks awesome. Ease of entry, lots of clearance. Fits a wide range of driver sizes. Heavy enough to stay still, but light enough to move on your own. High quality hardware. Good footprint. Modular design. Upgrade later. Keyboard, button box, speakers. Made in the EU. And now on to the not so good. And this was another one of those cases where I really struggled with, or really had to search to find flaws or things that I didn't like with this rig. But let's go ahead and cover the few that I did find, starting off with its price. It is an expensive rig. The butt kicker add-on was hard to install. Shifter mount clearance for shorter drivers. Not much adjustment for the shifter. Seat is a little upright. And the pedal tray flex. And now on to the bottom line. There are a lot of rigs on the market to choose from, and they all bring different aspects or different qualities to the table. Sometimes it's the price, sometimes it's the function, sometimes it's the way they look that really strikes something with us and puts that rig to our favorite or the one that we like the most. In the case of the RSeat RS1, it hits me on several levels that make it an exceptional rig. I found this rig to be a perfect combination of function and beauty at a reasonable price point. It was plenty stiff in the wheel deck area, and that is so important to me when racing, especially when on a powerful wheel. And most important to me was that I was actually able to get the wheel exactly at the distance, the angle, and the height that I wanted, and that is also very critical in a rig for me. It is also extremely important to me that my pedals end up exactly where I want them, and I was able to achieve this in both distance and angle with no compromise. And the only flex that I found in this rig was that little bit of movement in the pedal tray when I was pressing on the brake hard. And to be honest, I didn't even notice this while I was driving. It was while looking at the footage later that I actually saw this movement. It really wasn't a big deal. The only thing that really did trouble me was the shifter mount position. And that will only be an issue for shorter drivers. But if you can drill 2 holes, then this won't be an issue at all. The overall footprint of this rig is also perfect for me. I want a substantial rig, something that won't slide around just from getting in and out of it. And at the same time, it wasn't so large that it took over my room or became impossible to move by myself. But what I really love most about the RSeat RS1 is its build quality and its thoroughness. Out of the box, it works with almost any piece of equipment that you can buy. And then on top of that, having the luxury of accessories that you can buy as you need. It is a good looking rig, it is a sturdy rig, and it is easy to get dialed in for your own needs. So in the end, the only thing that I can really point to that would be an issue for someone considering purchasing an RS1 rig is the actual cost. It is an expensive rig. Coming in at about $1,000, it might be out of reach for some. But I can say that when I inspect this rig and I look at the quality of its build, its parts, and its function, I can see how the price is what it is. Every piece of metal, hardware, fabric, or composite material feels very high-end. There are no cheapo parts that make you think, why did they do that? And when I think about a good sim rig, it should last a lifetime. It will likely see a handful of different wheels, pedals, and shifters and be ready for more. This RS1 will last a lifetime. So I hope you've enjoyed this review of the RSeat RS1 sim racing chassis. And as usual, I hope my review has been thorough and has left you with no unanswered questions. But if there is something I missed, something you want to know, I urge you, please email me at Shaun@thesimpit.com and I'll do my best to answer your questions. This is the Simpit. I'm Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track.